Hello, welcome everyone. I am so excited that you're joining us today. Welcome to Speakeasy. This is the best place to be if you want in on the secrets to effective communication. I am your host, Madeline Schwarz. I'll give it one more moment for people to join. And welcome to Speakeasy. So I am Madeline. I'm a communication coach and I help quiet leaders speak up at work. And I help teams leverage the power of all of their people. And I like to think about my job. It's a lot like cooking. So I give people a recipe to take all of the ideas in their head and put them together in a way that makes sense and tastes good to other people. And today's topic is all about communicating with personality over perfection. And I am delighted to have special guest here, Danielle Hughes, if you would introduce yourself.
Yes, hi everyone. So many people, and I recognize a whole bunch of friendly faces, so that's always so nice. So I am Danielle Hughes. I'm the Chief Personality Officer of More Than Words Marketing. And what I do is I help people to develop what I call your genuine personality brand. And the reason that we do this is to own and embody your message, get comfortable expressing it, and learn how to convey what makes you different from your competition so that you can attract the right audience and repel the wrong one.
Well, thank you for joining me, Danielle. Thank you for everyone here who's listening in at Speakeasy. And I want to start with a poll. So you can use the react button at the bottom of your window for this event. And I'm curious how many perfectionists or recovering perfectionists do we have in the audience? Give us a reaction if you relate to that. All right. I see a lot of...
Holy cow.
Okay. So this topic is relatable. How to communicate with personality over perfection. And the way this event is going to work is Danielle and I are going to talk for the next 10 minutes or so, and then we will give you a chance to ask questions or share comments or stories. So you will be able to raise your hand and join us to speak. And where I want to start, Danielle, is as an introvert, I really love the concept of personality brand. And I wonder if you can share with the audience the difference between personal brand and personality brand.
Sure. So, the word personal means private. And so this idea that because of social media and, having to basically put ourselves out there, that we have to put everything about ourselves out into the public sphere just never felt right to me. And, I am an extrovert. And even for me, it's like, why does everybody need to know everything about me? So this idea of personality brand to me is that our personality is who we are. That's the piece that is external facing every day, all the time. And we are in control of dialing up and down our personality depending on who we're interacting with, right? So your friends and your family get a lot of your personality, but people at work or strangers that you meet or you're talking to in line get smaller amounts, but they're still getting something. And what you're giving them is a way to connect. So personality brand to me is you being in control of what you share with other people in order to foster that connection.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I couldn't agree more, because as someone who is an introvert, I definitely don't want to share all of my private life on social media, but I do want to share my personality and feel comfortable letting that come through. And
exactly.
And I'm curious where you see perfectionism getting in the way of people communicating?
I mean, like so much. I am not a perfectionist or even a recovering perfectionist. I'm actually like the 100% opposite. But I think that a lot of our desire for perfection stems in fear, right? And this fear of putting something out in the world that will maybe not create the best response or the response that we're looking for, or it's unknown. And so we hang on to this definition of perfection in order to not have to potentially get hurt or put things out into the world that we could get rejected. But I mean, first of all, what even is perfection, right? One person's perfection is another person's, middle of the road. And I just think if you are constantly seeking perfection, right, it's the enemy of good, right? A lot of times it's just, you just have to dip your toe in the water. And if you're waiting until you are an Olympic swimmer, you're just never going to get there.
Yeah. And perfection is the opposite of done.
Correct.
And as someone who long struggled with perfectionism earlier in my life, and still sometimes find my brain gravitating toward that, I think this concept of communicating with personality is really an amazing way to help people get past the things that are holding them back. Because what I see with my clients a lot is that they have an idea, but they don't share it. They don't raise their hand or speak up in a meeting because they're afraid of being judged, someone thinking the idea is stupid or having it, torn apart, or that it's not completely thought through. And what happens when they hold back in that moment is they censor their own ideas. And so we're just rejecting our own ideas and ourselves.
Yes, no, keep going.
And as a protective mechanism. Yes. And then none of our personality comes through.
Right. And people are not perfect, right? So if you are embracing who you are, that is the imperfect, warts and all, completely authentic, genuine person who has thoughts and feelings that aren't always fully formed and fully baked. And it doesn't mean that they don't deserve to be responded to or aired, because sometimes you have to get it out there in order to even fully form it, right? The act of putting something not baked out into the world as an idea or a thought or a question is what then starts to stem conversation and discussion and brainstorming. And, Brene Brown talks about the story I'm telling myself. I think that's so much around perfection, right? The story you're telling yourself about how if you don't say the most perfect thing in the world, somebody's going to think you're stupid or reject you or not care. And what if it's the opposite? What if you say something not perfect and everybody is like, oh my God, I've been thinking that too, and I was just too scared to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're always presuming the worst. And I like to say, assume positive intent. Assume that if you raise your hand to say something, it will be well received. Obviously that's an ideal workplace, but that should be the workplace that we all want to be in and create for each other, is a place where these things are well received.
Yes, I love that idea because I agree. We spend so much of our time focusing on what we are afraid of, what we don't want to happen. And then we forget to show up for the thing that we actually do want to happen. And that does require putting our toe in the water, putting ourselves out there.
Yes. And, 9 times out of 10, when somebody in a meeting says something, so many other people were thinking it. And the tension goes down in the room because everyone is turning oh God, I was thinking the same thing. Right. And somebody just needed to step forward and do it and say it. And why shouldn't you be that person? Why shouldn't you be entitled to, express what you're thinking at that moment?
Yes. Yeah. And, I'm curious, I want to do another poll of the audience. So who here identifies as an introvert? Give us a heart reaction if you do. Show some introvert love. Okay. So a number of people here.
Fair amount.
Yeah. And
maybe.
Yeah. And who identifies as an extrovert? Give us a thumbs up.
Who's an ambivert? Maybe we got people in the middle. I think like a lot of us are a meld of both. I think as much as I am an extrovert and I do get my energy from other people, like there are times when I just want my couch and some Netflix and I don't want to talk to anyone. And so there is, no hard and fast rules for everybody is one or the other, right? I think we all live in the gray. Sometimes we're a little bit of both.
Yeah. And for all the people who would rather sit on the couch with Netflix than go to a networking event or put themselves out there on social media, what are some tips that you can share to help people stand out in interviews, at their current jobs, or when they are networking or on social media?
I mean, the thing that I talk about with my clients and when I work with people, it's less about what you do and more about how you do it. So to me, the key piece when you're putting something out there, in the social media universe is differentiating yourself around how you do your job or how you communicate or how you work as opposed to what you do. Because that to me is the most interesting thing about you. When we talk about personality brand, I always talk about like, what is the hobby? What is the passion? What is the thing outside of work that you could talk to anybody about for hours, even if it's a perfect stranger? And how do you kind of either share a little bit of that, lead with that, bring that into the conversation? In a networking event, it's more just like, don't think that you're going there just to talk about business. Like nobody really wants to talk about business. Like we want to connect and we want to get to know people. So the easiest thing for me is always like, can I find someone who is like jewelry I want to compliment, or they're wearing a fun outfit, or there's just an easy way to break the ice about like the food or the atmosphere. Or, I mean, you could ask someone like, what podcasts are listening to, or like, what music are you doing, like listening to right now? Like anything that it doesn't have to be professional, quote unquote, to start the conversation. I think so many of us hold ourselves back because we think we need to be the most polished, professional experts always, when we're just people that just want to connect. And if you start the connection over conversation and your hobbies or your passions, you can always get to the business stuff later. It's not going anywhere, but you will feel so much more comfortable if you break the ice in another way than just having to dig in and give your elevator pitch right away.
Yes, 100%. I agree. And it reminds me, like when I am teaching workshops about networking, I always tell people, like, don't introduce yourself with the information that's on the top of your resume. Like that's the least interesting stuff. Instead, share something personal, or at least include that along with what you do, because you could tell someone your job title and where you work, and that might mean nothing to them. They might not have heard of the company. They might not know what it is that you do. But if you also share that you're a marathon runner, or, in your spare time, you really like to bake pies, or, something about yourself, it just infinitely expands the possibility of making a connection and sparking a conversation.
100%, right? And we want to, like, that's how you establish, right, know, like, and trust, right? We can't know and like someone if we're just talking about how, the business stuff, right? We have to get a little bit of sense of who they are as a human being. And these connection points are what are going to facilitate that, right? It's like, why do people, the traditional go to the golf course with people at work, like the sales teams? that's how you bond. They're bonding over golf. And so we don't really have the golf course anymore, thank God. So we can bond over more other fun things that we do like to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for anyone who is here at the very beginning, I introduce myself using the analogy that my job is like cooking, and I give people a recipe to take all of their ideas in their head and put them together in a way that tastes good to other people. And
yes.
using something that I like to do in my personal life, and this is what I always share with clients, is if you talk about your work through something that lights you up, then that excitement is going to come through, as opposed to just sharing a job title and a company name.
100%. And you don't even have to talk about your job. Like, again, it doesn't even have to get to that point. Like, you can connect with someone, you know, over your hobbies and passions, and then at some point, maybe later on, maybe in a follow-up conversation or whatever, if they go to your LinkedIn, they'll see what you do. And the professional stuff.
Yes.
Oh my God, I love it. Is that a motorcycle?
It sounds like it.
I mean, that's insane.
So I want to open it up to the audience for questions. If you have questions or comments or stories, please raise your hand so that I can bring you up on stage to talk to us. You can also ask questions in the comments for the event, and we can answer them there.
Always. Amazing. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're
Right.
looking for the most imperfect question in the world. Oh, Mary's got her hand up. Yay.
All right. Let me unmute you.
Hey, good morning, ladies.
Hi, Mary.
The space. And I just wanted to say also, a few coaches on a live last week or a week before were speaking about when you watch the most interesting TED Talks, they don't jump straight into the topic either. They tell a story. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times when we are meeting new people, or virtually meeting people on LinkedIn, or how do we get started, I feel like looking for what we're interested in, you know, searching in the search bar, literally, like if you like art or music or just whatever, people speak enough. In the past, I'll ask you this, I guess this will be my question. In the past few months, have you noticed that more people are doing more personalization of interest and speaking less about business all the time? I feel like that's something I've noticed. Have you noticed that in the past few months? And then the second question is, have you found more interest on LinkedIn, connecting with people through like audio rooms like this, or have you literally just been like going and searching for something specific for a client for your business base, like specifically narrowing it down to, I want, you know, my client base is this type of person or whatever. So those are, I guess, would be my question.
Sure. I can speak to the first part. I mean, obviously, like this is what I do, is bring out the more sort of personality piece. So of course, to say that I've been seeing more of it, yes. And I think it's everywhere. And I think the reason that it's becoming so much more pervasive is because of hybrid and virtual work, right? In an office, it's much easier to connect with people on a one-to-one basis, to get to know people. You see how they decorate their stuff. You tend to spend time with them. You have lunches together. You're getting to know who they are as a person, not just your coworker. But now with hybrid and with virtual work, it's, you know, I say it's become all about the work, right? We are losing connection. We are losing work friendships. We are like, I used to have a work husband, like, who was like my best buddy at my job. And, you know, we joked about it, but like, that's the piece that like we are sorely missing is the human connection. So I think by people putting that into their bios and putting part of that onto their LinkedIn headlines, it is a way to say, I am more than just my job. I have other hobbies, and I want you to know about them because they flesh me out as a fully formed human. And that's how we're going to connect.
I love that, Danielle. And I wonder if you can share a story about anyone you've worked with in corporate who has used this idea of personality in their bio.
Oh my God, so many. But a recent one, and I love this example, is I had a woman come to me and she'd just been promoted, and and her bio was like a jargon train or jargon salad, as I call it. Like basically just throw in all the jargon and mix it up, and it's not telling you anything. And she was sharing with me that she loves to go to like record stores and collect like vintage vinyl. And she's always looking for like these like deep cuts or these like special gems. And she's got a list of records that she's trying to accumulate. And it also so happens that she does like system process improvement and change management. So to your point, Mary, about like a story, like stories, we love them. And Madeline can speak to this too, because they're so visual. And so the visual to me of her in a record store, like grabbing in the bins and hunting through bins and pulling these records out, is how I see her working in process and change improvement, right? She is hunting for ways to make things better and more efficient. And so she was able to meld how she's a vinyl connoisseur. And she talked about, going, like seeing things and figuring out how to make changes in systems and processes is like hunting for a deep cut in the record store, right? Like you're always looking for the thing that's going to, again, make you the most excited because you've figured out the best way to do something. And, she gets so many comments now from people about the vinyl connoisseur. And at the end of her LinkedIn, it says, if you want to talk about I'm on the hunt for every album in Rolling Stone's top 500, right? So much more interesting than getting into all the minutia of systems and process improvement.
Yes, I love that. And so much more interesting than the jargon salad that you often see.
Correct.
And I'm curious if anybody else in the audience has a question that they would like to ask, or a comment or a story that they want to share. Raise your hand if you do. And on this topic of stories, the human brain is wired for stories. That's how we connect with people. And we're 22 times more likely to remember something that's presented in a story than it is if it's just presented as a fact alone. So when I am working with people to prepare for presentations or panels or interviews, we always work on building a bank of stories that people can tell. And it takes so much pressure off needing to have that perfect one sentence elevator pitch, because you can pick and choose and pull stories off the shelf in the appropriate moment when you know what those are.
100%. I'm taking a pottery class right now. So I wanted to do something creative, and I signed up for this like 7-week pottery course. It's like 3 hours a week, every week. And I thought I would love it, and I'm not good at it. So there's the perfection piece, right? I'm very much struggling. But what was interesting was like last night, the teacher was talking to us about kind of the art of throwing pots and pottery and all these things. And it dawned on me that pottery is so much like baking, because you have to be so precise. And the reason that I don't like baking is because I don't like to be precise, but I love to cook because I feel like there's a lot more leniency in cooking. Like you can try a whole bunch of stuff and 9 times out of 10 it comes out great and you don't have to worry about it. But with baking, one small thing and you've ruined it. And it's very much like pottery, one small slip up and your whole thing, basically falls apart. So it made me think, and speaking of story, like that's a great analogy for any of us, right? We're so afraid to make a mess and throw the pot. But who cares? At the end of the day, you just get more clay and you just build it again. And you just have to keep trying. And like, obviously, the more you do it, you're going to get better. Like, I know that I will eventually get better at this. I'm just presuming where I quote unquote should be already. And there really is no should, because everybody comes at something in their own time.
Yeah. And, I just want to share another perspective on baking as a baker. So before having a child, I baked a lot of pies. I could make pie crust from memory, practically do it in my sleep. And since having a child, I have found I am a much more distracted baker. And it turns out that you don't always need to be so precise or do things in the right order, and that you can still have a delicious and beautiful final product. And so that's one place that I have learned that it doesn't always need to be perfect to enjoy it at the end.
There you go. I think that's how I feel about my sourdough, which, I do bake sourdough, and that's, you can be a little bit more like, 52 grams for the starter instead of 50, a little bit extra flour, a little bit extra water. It doesn't really matter, which is, I think, also why I bake sourdough.
Candace, do you have a question or comment you want to share? You can unmute yourself if you do have a question these last 3 minutes.
There we go. Sorry, found the button. It's not really a question. I mentioned earlier about an example, and it was a tip that was handed to me by a mentor at one point, where I had to give a talk to a complete room full of strangers who weren't necessarily particularly interested in what I was giving the talk about. And he turned to me and he said, "Candy, just start with something ridiculous and it can only go up from here." So I stood up at the front of the room and inhabited for a brief moment the personality of some sort of 14th century bard, and went, "Greetings, brethren, hark, for I bring to you good news." And suddenly I had a room full of people who've been sort of at that sort of 3:30 in the afternoon, is this meeting still going? Point, sitting right up and going, "What?" And then I gave the presentation, and it really did only go up from there, but it was remembered.
Yeah, it's so important to hook people from the very beginning. Like the moment before we start speaking in a presentation is when we have the most attention of our audience. So we don't want to squander that precious attention on thank yous or logistics, and instead want to tell a story or do something to create engagement or break the ice at the beginning. And what you were saying is you were speaking on a topic that you didn't think was very interesting. I can't remember the exact words that you used, but when I work with clients, the three things that I always focus on with people on presentations is the communication triad: the message, the mindset, and the delivery. And so when people have a topic that they think is boring, and I certainly had like a number of clients, particularly the attorneys, who will often get stuck in that trap, that is working on the mindset is the most important part, because if you think your content is boring, it's not a great place to start in engaging other people and making the audience think it's interesting. So I love that story. And sorry, did you have something to add, Danielle?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, what Candace, you did is like you jarred them out of their stupor, which I think, right? It's not always about like story. I think so many of us are like, we lean in with, "Oh, I'm so-and-so and I have this many years of experience," or "this is my job title." And people are not, like, we tune out when we've heard the same thing over and over. So anytime you can lead with something that's going to jar people out of their stupor, they're going to pay attention. So even being silly like you did, it doesn't even have to be a story. It's just, how do you change it up so that they're hearing something that they didn't expect and now they're paying attention? And I love that so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
And humor is a great way to do that. So we have come to the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone for joining us today at Speakeasy. The next one is April 18th, where I will be talking about communicating with empathy. So please join for that. If I can help you in your communication before then, reach out to me on LinkedIn so we can schedule a time to talk. And be sure to connect with Danielle and follow her as well. And thank you for joining.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Madeline.
Thanks, ladies.
Bye.
Go out there and be imperfect, people.
Yes, and jar people from their stupors.
That's right. That's right. We can't jar them for being stupid, but we can jar them from their stupors.
All right. Bye, everyone.